Welcome, I'm Janka and this is Biomedical Signal Processing, lecture 11. So today we have the last lecture of the semester. If we look back what we did this semester, in this pipeline we started with how the signals in our body are arising, and then we have seen how to model them. So what mathematics can we put behind these signals to make it easier to analyze them, understand them. And then we have seen how to do different filtering methods, how to detect events, which was a very important step of this pipeline, as usually this is the final step you would like to get in an original pipeline. And then we have talked about feature extraction, so here we have considered spectral estimation, wavelengths, sparsity, so how to get these denoised signals or different techniques for how to have a sparse signal at all, because we have seen that natural signals are usually sparse in some wavelet domain. And then we have seen source separation, which have given us the possibility to reduce our dimensions or transform our basis vectors to separate different signals from each other and to get noise out of the system. And now we will get to the last step, classification. So after all the work we have done, now we would like to give an answer to the patient, to the doctor. So we have seen the signal, we have analyzed it, and now we would like to give a diagnosis using these parameters we have gotten out from the data. So first of all, in the first chapter, let's see what probabilistic classification is. Let's say we have a very simple parameter, the temperature of the patient. So we have measured his or her temperature and we would like to tell whether the person is sick or not. Usually, if we have measured something, if we have measured this temperature, we would say that the person is healthy if this value is below somewhere 37, or we could say that if it's very hot outside or there is some other condition which we have to take into consideration, then even 38 would be okay in some cases maybe. But most likely for these high values, we would say that the patient is sick. And even if its temperature, the patient's temperature is low, the patient could still be sick. So it's not safe to say that the patient is healthy using only this one parameter. So we would like to put a boundary here somewhere to tell that about this temperature the patient is most likely sick, but below it the patient is most likely healthy. So how to do this? For this, in this simple classification, what we do is to draw the discriminant function of this distribution. So this will be subtracting the positive, so the ill case, from the negative, so the healthy case. And this will give us this red function over here. And what we do is to check where this discriminant function is crossing the zero line. And we could say that this is our threshold. Below this threshold, the patient is most likely healthy, but above it, the patient is rather sick. So this could be our threshold. We could also consider cases where we have to draw multiple thresholds, because like with very low temperatures, the patient could also be sick, so that could signal again something unhealthy condition. So again, we draw this discriminant function and we check where it is crossing the zero line, and we will have two thresholds, and we say that between these two thresholds the patient is most likely healthy, is okay. So this would be what probabilistic classification is about, but we will get into the details, so what it really is and why is it dangerous. There are some cases in the legal history where they have shown that these statistics should be kept out of the courtroom, because it's very, very easy to misinterpret these solutions which mathematics gives us about classification, healthy, non-healthy cases. Like there was a case where there was a mother who had a child, and this child had a sudden infant death. This is the so-called SID syndrome. So the child died in a quite young age. And later on, the lady had another baby, and this kid also died from this disease, this syndrome. And then authorities got suspicious, and they said that this cannot be, let's investigate this case. And even though they had no evidence, so when they did the biopsy, they couldn't find anything against the woman, they said in the courtroom, this was actually a pediatrician who said this, that having one SID syndrome in your family has a probability of 1/8543, but having 2 such cases will multiply these probabilities, and it will be something 1 in 73 million, which is a lot more than the population of the UK. So it's very, very suspicious. We don't believe the mother. And upon this argument, they have sent the woman into prison. It quite ruined her life, but actually the authorities had to admit that this conclusion was wrong, because they haven't considered many other circumstances which you have to. So we know from statistics that we can multiply such events together, such probabilities, if they are independent. But is it independent? So we have 2 children from the same family who are suffering the same disease. So children from one family having this has a higher probability than 2 different families with different background, because they are living in the same circumstances, the same environment, they have the same genetics or very similar genetics. So it's actually, if you already had such a syndrome in your family, such a death, then you will have a higher probability to have a second one than a family which is not influenced by this, not affected by this syndrome. So this way they had to admit later that this was a bad decision, and this was one of the main agreements which actually led to not allow statistics into the courtroom in the UK. Then another occasion, another case was a rape case. So in this case, there was a woman who got raped, and she described her attacker and gave the description of an older man, and they found someone. But this someone was very young, didn't look like the lady described, and had an alibi, so he didn't really fit the picture. But when they did the DNA test, they got a positive response. So they had a positive match. They said that it must be him, because the possibility that you have a DNA match is 1 in 20 million. So again, if you have 40 million people, then 2 of them might have the same DNA. And in this case, again, they haven't considered many things. So because they said that it's a very low probability that we have missed it, because 1 in 20 million is a very low number, and we don't know anything about those other people around the world. We don't know where they live. We cannot check this. But you could check the man's acquaintances, because they must have very similar DNA and they must live very close to him. But they did not do this, and with this Bayesian reasoning, they said that most likely this is the man who did the rape. And this was again a case which had to be kept out from the courtroom because of this mishandling of the statistics. So This is very dangerous to play with these things, with statistics. You always have to be aware of what you are doing, and we will see in the next chapter what this Bayesian reasoning is and how to handle it. But before that, please take the quiz below.